I always tried to be at the delivery of all of my children. And Italo, who of course didn't have a name then, was supposed to, hit planet Earth sometime around the end of July or the beginning of August. I had to go to Asia. I had to go to Japan and China and spent a considerable amount of time in China. So one of the things that I did is I went to his mother's stomach, Osei Mchawi, and I bent down and I talked and I said, listen, I don't want you coming out here until I get back from this trip. And I got back, and it was probably like the next day or so that Italo was actually born. So to me that was significant, because it showed something in regards to that he was listening, even in regards to him being in his mother's stomach, in the womb.
Italo probably was the poster child for greatness, or the expectance of greatness from out of all of our siblings. I think he was probably the one that was expected to go the farthest as far as education, as far as his ability to be able to reach people. He was a real people person, and people gravitated towards him because of that. I think he had the potential to really be and do whatever it is that he wanted to do with his life. So that his life was cut short early was unfortunate, because you couldn't really, his potential was limitless. And so what he could have been is anything. He could have been whatever it is that he wanted to be.
So I think I'm supposed to start off by giving you guys context to that video. So that video was a part of an interview series that which is a part of a project that I'm working on called The Art of Dying Young. And what The Art of Dying Young is a sort of immersive media tour of a neighborhood using the story of a young man who was muralized there. So I'm starting with a young man named Italo Mchawi from Bedford-Stuyvesant, Brooklyn, who has a mural right on the corner of Madison and Marcus Garvey. And what I'm doing is I'm using a technology called augmented reality. And what augmented reality is, it's like, have you guys heard of Pokemon Go? So it's the same technology, basically, that allows you to place content in the real world. So what I'm doing is I'm telling the story of Italo and his family. By using the technology, it will allow you to experience his life and the community, through his life and his family's life. So you'll go on stops in the community, starting at his mural. You'll go to the school he went to, which is an African free school. You'll go to the institution that his family built, which is an organization called the East. And you'll go to many places around the neighborhood that will contextualize his life. One of the reasons I'm doing this project and why it's space-based is because in order to understand the lost asset of someone, you have to understand their journey. And journey is place. Most memory is created by way of context to place. We have the most indelible, strongest memories when we contextualize it with place. You remember your place where you got your first kiss. You remember your high school prom. You remember where those things were. So I'm hoping I can create a memory log of Italo and his family in the neighborhood through these films and these audio installations using this technology. That's The Art of Dying Young, and hopefully it'll be in the spring in New York City, and hopefully you can come on the tour.
You want to just tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and then we'll get into a conversation. I just want us to go through so folks will understand who we are.
Yeah, probably my most important role today is I'm the pianist, composer's father. I was backstage listening to the fathers talk, just that last panel, and the fact that they didn't have the chance to have their sons grow up and reach their potential is a very, very deep thing. It's a very painful thing. And so that's kind of what I'm sitting with right now. As far as what I do, I do work on violence prevention around the country and do research on it, and have most recently been writing about community trauma. And I think we've been witnessing a lot around that issue of community trauma. And I think my role today is actually to speak about the healing part of it. And I think reimagining black males is an important part of that process. I also want to talk a bit about reimagining our community and healing our community, and that's an integral part of us moving forward to where we need to be.
Thank you. Go ahead, FM.
How are you guys doing? My name is Jessica Disu. I'm also known as FM Supreme. I am an artist, educator, humanitarian, rap artist, born and raised in Chicago, organizer. And for the past, 10 years, I've been serving young people in Chicago and I guess across this country through spoken word advocacy programs. In 2012, being fed up with gun violence in my city, a couple friends and I decided to create Chicago International Youth Peace Movement, which was just an idea, a peer-to-peer advocacy group where we would promote peace through music, through peaceful programming. And from that, we created youth leadership development programs, partnered with different organizations around the city. I've taken young people from the south and west sides of Chicago to Southeast Asia, to Nicaragua, to South Africa. And the purpose of these trips is to show young people on the south and west sides is that, no one is coming to save us. We must save ourselves. We have to be that change we wish to see. And if you only see your block, then it's hard for you to imagine something else. And so it's great to visit different communities and just see how they combat violence and what are ways to build community. So I've been doing a lot of work around that for the past several years. And so I'm very happy to join the campaign for Black Male Achievement for Black Male Reimagine. This is my third one, so I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you. So again, I'm Anthony Smith, and I'm the Executive Director for Cities United, and we work with mayors across the country, really helping mayors put together strategies and solutions to reduce the homicide rate of African American men and boys, really helping mayors focus in on the young men and boys who are most likely to be shot or to be the perpetrator, because too many times we put together programs for all kids and not worry about the ones who are most at risk. So we're really saying to mayors, young men between ages of 14 to 24 are the ones who are living in this danger zone that we really need to pay attention to, knowing that they got to do some upstream work, knowing they got to do some reentry work, but we need to be pulling kids out of that cycle of violence and getting them reconnected and giving them the hope and the aspiration that they need so that they can at least stay alive to realize what their dream is so that they can start living out that purpose. So we've been doing this since 2011, proud partner with the Campaign for Black Male Achievement. We're working in about 84 cities. DC is one of those cities. Really just saying we need a solid plan of action to really think about how we help these young black men have a different outcome, how we help them find their hope, how we help them find their dreams, so that they can, help us as a country. You heard Shawn talk about this is really bigger than Black Male Reimagine. It's about how do we reimagine what this country can be and do for us, for our young black men and boys. So we're really proud to be here. We've got about 10 more minutes to have this conversation. I know they're keeping us on track. So I want to go back to Howard and talk a little bit more about this community trauma. But as we talk about this conversation, we're talking about the art of dying young. A lot of our young men die at different times, right? It's not just the physical death, it's the dreams and all of those things that they lose along the way. So if we have this conversation, let's just talk about all the different opportunities that we can step in and help our young men not die either physical or mental and spiritual in all of those different ways.
Thank you.
Yep.
When I go around the country and I talk to folks, one of the things I start with is, and this is going to date me, it's a hip-hop song that goes, "It's like a jungle, sometimes it makes me wonder how I keep from going under. Ha, 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 ha."
You dated all of us.
Okay? Now, what's that about? This was in 1982. This is about trauma. It's about going under the ground and being and dying, but it's also about the going under psychologically, under the weight of not just the physical individual violence and interpersonal violence we're subjected to, but the structural violence that our communities have been subjected to for centuries. And this historical and structural violence that has had an impact on all of us. And it's that has had an impact at the community level that we have to take account of. I think we're coming to the point where we understand as communities that lots of our young people and adults are walking around with individual trauma. And when I speak about traumatized communities, most people think about a number of people, individuals who have trauma. But what I'm talking about also is that our communities, in terms of the social fabric and the social relationships in our communities, the physical environment, the built environment in our communities, and also the structure of opportunity in terms of economics and education have all been either undermined, destroyed, or turned on its head, where they now produce violence instead of produce health, wellness, and community. And that's what we need to concentrate on rebuilding as we help to heal our individual young people. Because you can't just heal young people and then send them back out into the environments that we've created for our young people. And ultimately, that's about communities doing it for themselves and demanding that the government and the rest of society step up and do what they should be doing in terms of helping to create the conditions for healthy young people and children.
Yeah, thank you.
I just wanted to add as well. I look at violence as a public health issue, especially in Chicago, where I'm from. When I see the violence in my community, I see it as a systemic violence, right? So I see that the structural inequalities in our societies, the lack of good jobs in the community, the lack of good food, so these food deserts to acquire, which affects your health, which affects your attitude and how you feel in the morning. So if you're having Flamin' Hots for breakfast and somebody make you mad, you might just snap off, right? Because you're not even getting the healthy nutrients that you need. And so education is the key. I truly believe that, to success, to survival, like, that's wisdom. But at the same time, if our young people, if we're not dealing with mental health, and I think mental health is something that we do not talk about enough in our communities, I mean, it's vital. It's vital. So I've been blessed to work with young men in the Cook County Juvenile Temporary Detention Center. And actually, right after George Zimmerman was acquitted in 2013, a pilot program that we created, which was called My Brother's Keeper, before the White House did the whole MBK movement. And we had our young brothers. It was called My Brother's Keeper, His Story. And these were young black boys, and it was 2 Latino brothers from different gangs. And prior to the program, they did not talk to each other. They was very like, it's whatever. But by the end of the program, not only were they sharing each other's stories and writing their own stories and performing, it was a brotherhood. By the end of that program, it was, I am my brother's keeper, and being able to see themselves, and then also seeing that I'm hurt, we all hurt. My daddy left too, or my daddy was arrested, or my daddy got killed, or my mama wasn't there, or I didn't grow up in a household. I've lived in all these different places. So I think that it's very important when we're dealing with our young people, especially when I'm in environments like this. I challenge our elders and my peers as well. When was the last time you asked a young person you don't know, what have you had to eat today? How was your day? What did you learn today? These things really matter. They make a difference. So I think that it's important to look at the collective work and look at policies and look at strategies and things like that. But if we're not doing the each one, teach one in a personal, then we're still going to continue to see the violence in our communities. And yeah.
No, that's, and I think, FM hit on a lot of things, and I think, part of it is we've got to worry about our educational system. But one of the things for me that I'm really stressing is that, we can have kids go through 12 years of school, do well, but can't come out and find opportunities, right? So we've got to be real clear that this is not just about doing well in school. It's also saying to the systems, we've got to create jobs and make sure that there's a market for these young people when they come out to be able to take care of themselves and their families. So we've got to push a lot of those things. I want to go back a little bit about how does all of this show up in your art, in your films, in the projects that you do? How does all this come out?
I'm really interested in place. I think that one of the things that we forget about in terms of these victims, we usually see black boys on these murals, or we see black boys in the news, and they're victims primarily, or they're seen as victims. But we don't know the context from where they come from, what they've created, their families created. And one of the things that we have to be careful about as a community is that we have to realize that we're placemakers. We have to continue to make space and make place. I mean, I'm sure Trayvon Martin's family made spaces in their community. You know, where did he go to school? You know, he had a life. He had a footprint of life. His family had a footprint of life. What did they enjoy? You know, and we think about institutions like the government or schools or healthcare or whatever those institutions are, but people are institutions. You know, a lot of times Pookie from Chicago, from the hood, is a local institution, or the person who shaves ice, or the guys in Williamsburg who play dominoes on the corner. Those are institutions and assets to our community. So my project is really more about sort of contextualizing these men as assets, as people who were in space, who were in place, who were placemakers, you know, who affected other people, whose families affect other people. You know, all those concepts are kind of re-meaning a life in reference to community and place, as opposed to just a news flash or a mural. So I think that you have to contextualize people. Yeah.
You know? I think that's right, and I want to go back to Howard real quick on this word around victim. I think we see our young men as victim when they're on the streets, but do the broader community see them as victims, and how does that play out, and why the homicide rate is high, why the suicide rate is raising? Are our kids, are our young men seen as victims, or even are they seen as children? So I want to put that to you, Howard, real quick.
I'll ask you, by who?
The broader community.
And the reason I asked that is because I've worked with thousands of young people over the last 15 to 20 years around the issue of violence, and work with some young men and even young women who have done some pretty bad things. And the narrative on those young people across the board, and it doesn't matter whether it's those who did bad or those who didn't, the narrative on them, we've heard about it today in terms of how they're constructed and understood by our society. But the reality is, even for the ones who are doing dirt, you take their day-to-day life, 96% of their time is spent like any other young person, trying to stay safe, trying to get next to somebody, trying to have some fun. I mean, that's who they are. They're young people. And we have succeeded in demonizing our young people to the point where even in our own community, we fear our young people. That's one of the fundamental problems, and it's a matter of reconnecting some of the intergenerational social relationships, but it's also about flipping the narrative and empowering the young people who are out there now, like FM and the young brother who is out here rapping. There are folks who are doing the work. There are young people who are putting in the work and flipping the script and really putting an example forward about what kind of power our young people have and purpose they can have. And we really need to figure out ways to empower them, to provide resources to them, and then get out their way.
Yeah. I'm gonna let you come in on that, FM, because I think you are in that world of the young people who are making a difference, who are looking for spaces and looking for us to get out the way a little bit and be there for support. Does your generation, or do the folks you're doing the work with, do they see themselves as victims? Do they see that they're allowed to be children and given space to do just what Howard said, all the things that kids want to do?
I would like to, one of my good friends, Jameer Burley, who you know, she says something like along the lines of young people are expert of their own experiences, and I believe that. And so in the performance I actually going to perform later, I actually speak about how they don't see our children as victims nor innocent. But do we? I do. Like when I look at, you know, when Dwayne Wade's cousin got killed in Chicago, you know, a reporter asked me from a national publication, you know, if the guys who had killed his cousin were on parole, that if they were still be in jail, is it likely that Dwayne Wade's cousin would still be alive? And I was like, probably not, because it was probably her time to go. And if it wasn't those two guys, it would have been someone else, because the system is broken. And with recidivism, how are we healing our society if we're arresting people who are breaking the law or are criminal Our time is up. Basically what I'm saying is, it's like, you cannot arrest away the problem, right? You can't lock it up, because guess what? As soon, and then not only do you lock up someone for 25, 30 years, then you put them back in society, they have X on their back, they can't get a job, so what do? They get back to doing the same thing they got them there in the first place, which is broken. And so, yeah, but we're done, sorry.
So, thank you all. Our time is up. I really appreciate you.
Time's up.